Have you ever walked into a place and felt like you didn't even exist? Not in a deep philosophical, we're all just stardust kind of way, no. I mean, standing there, real, breathing, dressed sharp, and somehow nobody sees you. That was today. Marcus Langston, 54 years old, built an empire from nothing. Owner of luxury hotels from coast to coast. A man who'd made it so big his name should have been stitched into the carpet. But not tonight. Tonight, here at the Langston Grand, his personal masterpiece. He might as well have been invisible. He wasn't in a suit. No polished shoes, no entourage clearing the way. Just a black blazer, dark jeans, and sneakers clean enough to catch the lobby lights. He didn't need flash to command respect. Usually, his presence did the talking. Usually, the front desk clerk didn't notice. Mid-20s, blonde, ponytail pulled tight like she was about to run a marathon she didn't train for. She was chewing gum so aggressively it sounded like a drumbeat, scrolling on her phone like her bonus depended on it. Marcus waited. Calm. A man doesn't build an empire by losing patience over a little disrespect. He gave people space to reveal themselves. Sometimes that was all you needed. He cleared his throat. Nothing. He tapped the counter lightly. Still nothing. All right. He stepped a little closer. Excuse me, he said, voice steady and low. Finally, she looked up. She sighed so loudly that the fake plants in the lobby probably shook. No smile. No greeting. No effort. Just a bored, yeah? Marcus smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. He recognized the look she gave him. He'd seen it before, years ago, back when people thought a man like him had no business dreaming bigger than his zip code. I have a reservation, he said. Marcus Langston. She arched an eyebrow. Emily, her badge red, and typed into her computer with the kind of enthusiasm people reserve for DMV paperwork. After a few lazy taps, she shrugged. Yeah, I don't see anything. Maybe you're at the wrong hotel, she said, a smirk tugging at the corners of her mouth. Marcus kept his breathing even. I'm at the right place. Emily leaned back in her chair, studying him like he was an equation she didn't want to solve. Happens all the time. People get confused. He nodded slowly. Right. Happens. Inside, though, he was already moving, already calculating, already deciding tonight wasn't just about a missing reservation. It wasn't about pride, either. It was about principle. Because Marcus Langston didn't spend a lifetime building palaces for people to be treated like they didn't belong. Not on his watch. Not tonight. Marcus pulled out his phone, the screen lighting up instantly with his reservation confirmation. No mistakes. No confusión. His name. His hotel. His kingdom. He held it up for Emily to see, keeping his expression calm, patient, even like he was giving her one last chance to come to her senses. She barely glanced at it. Yeah, well, system doesn't lie, she said, shrugging like a child caught with chocolate all over her face, insisting she didn't eat the cake. Marcus leaned slightly on the counter, lowering his voice just enough to make her lean in. Neither does my email. Emily sighed again, loud and exaggerated, punching a few lazy keys on the computer. Look, sir, maybe you made a mistake. Maybe you booked the wrong night. Maybe you meant the other Langston property across town. Happens all the time. Marcus smiled, slow and steady. She thought she was in control. She thought she was schooling him. That was cute. And if I didn't make a mistake, he asked, watching her eyes flutter with fake patience. She shrugged again, the universal body language for not my problem. Then maybe the system glitched, she said, turning back to her phone like the conversation was over. But Marcus wasn't here for conversation. He was here for the truth. He calmly pulled out a second phone, this one reserved for internal operations. Logged in, accessed the hotel's master booking system. A few taps later, there it was. The reservation was confirmed. Marcus Langston. Check in today. Suite 1802. Reserved under corporate executive status. Exactly where it was supposed to be, except someone had manually deleted it an hour ago. Marcus narrowed his eyes and scrolled down to the activity log, and there it was, bold as daylight. Reservation deleted by Emily Carter. Front desk clerk. He exhaled through his nose. Slow and deliberate. This wasn't incompetence. This wasn't a system glitch. This was a choice. A message. He looked up at Emily, who was now laughing quietly at something on her phone. oblivious to the hurricane about to roll right over her. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't slam his hand on the counter. He simply smiled and said, "Tell me something, Emily." She blinked, startled by the sudden attention. "What happens when someone deletes a reservation from the system?" he asked casually, like he was discussing the weather. She straightened a little, clearly trying to recall whatever half-hearted training she'd sat through. It just disappears. It's like it never existed." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "And who has the ability to do that?" She hesitated, twirling a strand of her ponytail, trying to look busy. "Only front desk staff. Autorisé personnel." "Like you," Marcus said. Her eyes flicked to his second phone, and for the first time all evening, her face lost a little color. Because there, in sharp black letters, was her name tied directly to the deletion. "Caught red-handed," Emily stammered, trying to spin some excuse, but Marcus didn't give her the oxygen. "Don't bother," he said, voice low, dangerous, final. He leaned in just a little closer, letting her feel every ounce of the mistake she had made. Because tonight wasn't just about teaching one employee a lesson. It was about sending a message that would echo through every hallway of his empire. Marcus straightened up slowly, sliding his second phone back into his pocket, never breaking eye contact. Emily swallowed hard, her fingers twitching uselessly on the counter, like she could somehow tap her way out of this mess. She opened her mouth, maybe to lie, maybe to plead, but Marcus shut it down with a look. "No more excuses," he said calmly. "Now, you're going to find me a room." Emily hesitated, and for a second, Marcus could almost hear the internal battle happening behind those fluttering lashes. Pride versus survival. Pride lost. Her hands shook slightly as she turned back to the computer. The clicks of her keyboard sounded louder now, desperate, sloppy. She didn't dare look him in the eye. Okay, let's see," she mumbled. Marcus folded his arms, watching her squirm, watching the realization sink in that she wasn't dealing with some nobody off the street. Not tonight. After a minute, she grabbed a key card, slid it across the counter without a word, and forced a brittle smile. "Here you go, sir." He didn't pick it up. "Which room?" he asked, voice as smooth and dangerous as black ice. Emily's smile faltered. She cleared her throat. 1427. Marcus raised an eyebrow. 1427. He knew it like he knew the back of his hand. Right by the industrial elevators. Sandwiched between the laundry chute and the maintenance closet. Noisy, cramped, and with a view of the dumpsters. He designed this building. He designed every square inch. "You sure about that?" he asked, tilting his head slightly, like he was giving her one last chance to come clean. Emily nodded quickly, her ponytail bobbing like a white flag. Marcus exhaled slowly, picked up the key card between two fingers, and gave her a long, deliberate look. "Thank you, Emily," he said, his tone so polite it burned. The lobby was quieter now. Other guests had noticed something was off. A couple lounging on the velvet sofas were pretending to read magazines, but stealing glances. A bellboy standing near the elevators suddenly found an urgent need to adjust his perfectly straight tie. Marcus turned without another word and made his way toward the elevators, his footsteps sharp against the marble floors. He didn't rush. No, he let the moment hang in the air like a storm cloud, letting everyone wonder what exactly they had just witnessed. But make no mistake, this wasn't over. Not even close. When he stepped into the elevator and the doors slid closed behind him, Marcus allowed himself a small, grim smile. He wasn't angry. Not anymore. He was methodical now. Calculated. Focused. Because what Emily didn't know, what nobody down there knew yet, was that she hadn't just mistreated a guest. She had insulted the man who signed the paychecks. And by the time this night was over, every single person in this building would know exactly who Marcus Langston was, starting with the one person who should have handled this before it ever reached him, the manager. Stephen Lane was about to have the worst night of his professional life. And Marcus? He was just getting started. Marcus didn't bother unpacking. He didn't even glance at the sad little room Emily had tried to stick him in. Instead, he sat at the scratched desk by the window, pulled out his laptop, and logged into the hotel's internal system. His fingers moved fast, precise, slicing through layers of management data like a scalpel. First stop, the guest complaint records. It didn't take long. There was laid out in black and white. A steady drip of issues, all pointing back to the same handful of staff. Lost reservations, room downgrades, rude service at check-in, and floating to the top of every report like oil on water. Emily Carter. Marcus shook his head slowly, scrolling deeper. He found internal notes. Little scraps from supervisors who clearly knew there was a problem but didn't want to deal with it. Coaching conversations scheduled. Verbal warning issued. Employee showed limited improvement. Limited, all right. Limited to making things worse. And then there was the name he was expecting to see. Stephen Lane. The general manager. The man who was supposed to catch this kind of cancer before it spread. The man who should have cleaned house long before Marcus ever had to lift a finger. Marcus closed the laptop with a soft click and stood up. His reflection stared back at him from the dark window. Calm, composed, dangerous. He made his way back to the elevator, rode it down in silence, and strode through the lobby without breaking pace. The few staff members on duty stiffened when they saw him coming. They didn't know who he was yet, but they could feel it. Authority moves differently. Marcus didn't knock when he reached the manager's office. Just pushed the door open and stepped inside. Stephen Lane looked up from behind his cluttered desk, startled. His cheap tie crooked and sweat already blooming under his armpits. He was mid-40s, but carried himself like a man permanently stuck in high school. Still trying to impress people who stopped caring a long time ago. Sir, can I help you?" Stephen stammered, half standing, half cowering. Marcus closed the door behind him with a slow, deliberate motion and leaned casually against it. "You Stephen Lane?" Stephen nodded, the movement jerky. "Good," Marcus said, his voice low and even. "We need to have a conversation. About your front desk." Stephen gulped visibly. I think everything's fine, sir. Just a minor mix-up, maybe." Marcus cut him off with a look. No raised voice. Just cold, heavy silence. The kind that filled a room without needing to shout. Emily Carter deleted a confirmed reservation. Marcus said, each word landing like a hammer. She lied to a guest. Tried to stick them in the worst room in the building. And you've let it slide for months. Stephen's mouth opened, searching for some excuse, some way to spin this. But there was nowhere to run. Marcus stepped closer, letting the space between them shrink until Stephen had to lean back in his chair. "This is my hotel," Marcus said, quiet but deadly. "You answer to me, and tonight you're going to start by fixing one very simple mistake." Stephen blinked rapidly, like he was trying to reboot his brain. "And what's that, sir?" he croaked. Marcus smiled, a slow, cold curve of his lips. "You're going to walk out there and fire her. Publicly. Right now." And Stephen Lane realized. This wasn't a conversation. This was an execution. Stephen sat frozen for a second, as if his brain was buffering the reality of what Marcus had just said. His mouth worked silently, no words coming out, just panicked little gasps of air. Marcus stayed exactly where he was, arms crossed, waiting, patient, like a judge already knowing the verdict. Finally, Stephen stumbled to his feet. "Why, yes, sir. Right away." Marcus nodded once, slow and deliberate, then stepped aside, letting Stephen shuffle past him like a man walking the Green Mile. Marcus followed at a measured pace, giving Stephen just enough space to sweat, but not enough to run. The lobby was still humming with low conversations and clinks of glasses at the bar. But as Stephen stepped out from behind the desk and cleared his throat, the noise dipped. Guests glanced up from their phones. Staff straightened their uniforms nervously. Emily looked up from her station, confusion flashing across her face. Stephen's voice cracked at first, then steadied. "Emily Carter," he said, loud enough for the entire front desk area to hear. "You're being terminated effective immediately for a violation of company policy and misconduct." Dead silence. Emily blinked, not understanding at first. Then her mouth twisted into a sneer. "What? Are you serious?" Stephen nodded stiffly. "Gather your things. You're done here." Emily's face flushed deep red. She looked around wildly, searching for someone to back her up. I didn't even do anything wrong. This is discrimination or harassment or something. Marcus watched it all with the stillness of a man sitting through a storm he knew would pass. He said nothing. He didn't have to. Emily was digging her own grave with every word. Stephen, to his credit, stood firm. You deleted a guest reservation without authorization. You lied to that guest. You violated trust and policy. Emily's gaze landed on Marcus, and something must have clicked because the color drained from her face. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again, and stormed toward the doors, her heels clicking furiously across the marble floor. Just before she pushed through the revolving doors, she spun around and glared at Marcus one last time, eyes burning with hatred and confusion. He gave her nothing, not a word, not a glance, just a steady, unreadable stare. And that silence? That crushed her more than anything he could have said. As the door spun shut behind her, the lobby seemed to exhale. Conversations resumed in hushed tones. A few staff members exchanged wide-eyed glances, but quickly looked busy when Marcus's gaze swept the room. Stephen wiped his forehead with a trembling hand and turned to Marcus. "It's done," he said, trying to sound confident, but his voice betrayed him. Marcus looked at him for a long moment, then smiled slightly. "Good start," he said, "but we're not done. Not even close." Stephen stood there, shifting awkwardly from foot to foot like he didn't know whether to stay put or bolt for the nearest exit. Marcus let him marinate in the tension for a moment longer before turning away from the desk, waving two fingers for Stephen to follow. They crossed the lobby, the marble floors amplifying the sharp clicks of Marcus's steps. He moved like a man who owned every square inch of the place, because he did. And the staff, the guests, even the damn chandeliers seemed to sense it now. Conversations dimmed. Heads turned. Marcus stopped at the middle of the lobby, turned slowly, and faced the remaining employees behind the front desk. Young, nervous faces stared back at him. Some wide-eyed. Some were trying very hard not to look like they were staring at all. He leaned casually against the counter, easy, relaxed, but his presence weighed heavier than concrete. "Listen up," Marcus said, voice low but cutting through the air like a knife. "Starting tonight, everything changes." The staff froze. Even the bartenders a few yards away stopped polishing glasses. "You're going to treat every guest who walks through those doors like they belong here. Like they matter. Like you actually give a damn," Marcus said. His tone wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. But it carried the kind of authority that made people straighten their spines without thinking. "Because if you don't," he paused, letting the question hang. "I'll know." A young guy, maybe early 20s, swallowed visibly. Another clerk, a woman who looked like she was barely out of high school, nodded so fast she looked dizzy. Stephen hovered awkwardly by Marcus's side, wringing his hands. Marcus turned his head slightly toward him without even looking fully. "You think I built all this by accident, Stephen?" Stephen jumped a little, like a student caught cheating. "And no, sir." Marcus smiled coldly. "Exactly." He pulled out the hotel's landline phone, dialed a number with practiced ease, and waited. A crisp voice answered almost immediately. "This is Langston," Marcus said. "Effective immediately, I want a full-scale audit on this property. Every department, every guest complaint from the last year was pulled and reviewed. Every employee was evaluated. Anyone who can't meet the standard gone." He hung up before they could even respond. The silence that followed was deafening. Stephen looked like he might be sick. A few of the other staff shifted uncomfortably. Marcus didn't blame them. Change was coming fast, and change always scared the ones who got comfortable doing the bare minimum. He turned back to the front desk team, softening his voice just enough to cut through the tension. "You do your jobs right. You treat people right. You'll be fine. Better than fine. You'll be part of something that actually means something." He let that sit for a beat. "But if you're here just to collect a paycheck and scroll TikTok all day," he shrugged casually. "Start packing." Marcus straightened up, adjusted the cuffs of his blazer, and started walking toward the elevators again. Behind him, the lobby was a frozen tableau, employees blinking like they'd just survived a hurricane and weren't sure if it was over yet. And Stephen Lane? He wasn't sure whether to follow, run, or pray. Car Marcus rode the elevator back to the top floor, silent, collected, feeling the building pulse around him like a living thing, slowly waking up to the fact that the old rules no longer applied. The days of sloppy service, silent discrimination, and lazy management were over. Tonight wasn't a blip. It was a clean break. He stepped out onto the executive floor, polished wood, subtle gold accents, floor-to-ceiling windows with a skyline view worth every dollar the guests downstairs were paying. And yet, in this moment, Marcus didn't care about the view. He cared about the future of his empire. In his suite, he dropped into the leather chair by the desk, opened his laptop, and got to work. First task, blacklist Emily Carter. Not just fired, banned. Flagged across every property Marcus owned. No second chances. No rehiring under a different manager who didn't bother to check. Emily had made her choice. She could live with it. Next, he pulled up Stephen Lane's file. It was worse than he expected. Guest complaints are unaddressed. Employee turnover is at double the industry average. Revenue at this property had been slipping for months, disguised by creative accounting tweaks that someone with Stephen's ambition, but none of Marcus's intelligence, thought would go unnoticed. Marcus leaned back, steepling his fingers under his chin. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even disappointed. He was surgical now, cold and precise. Feelings didn't build empires. Standards did. There was a knock at the door. Stephen, of course. Marcus let him knock a second time before answering, just to make the point sink a little deeper. He opened the door slowly, standing tall, blocking the entrance like a wall. Stephen's face was pale, almost gray under the warm lights of the hallway. His tie hung loose, jacket unbuttoned. The picture of a man who knew the axe was already swinging. "Mr. Langston, sir, please," Stephen said, voice trembling. "I didn't know it was you." "If I had known." Marcus cut him off with a single upraised hand. "That's exactly the problem, Stephen. You didn't know." Stephen's mouth opened and closed, searching for something, anything, that might save him. But Marcus wasn't looking for apologies. He was looking for accountability. "You should have known," Marcus said, his voice low even. "You should have known what was happening in your lobby. You should have known your guests were being disrespected. You should have known your staff wasn't living up to the standards we built." Stephen swallowed hard. "I can fix it. I swear. I'll work double, triple, whatever it takes." Marcus shook his head slowly. "It's not about working harder, Stephen. It's about seeing what's right in front of you." He stepped back, letting Stephen stumble inside the suite like a man walking into a courtroom where the verdict was already written. "You fired Emily," Marcus said. "That was the easy part." Stephen nodded eagerly, like a dog waiting for a treat. "But you let it get this far," Marcus continued, each word sharp as glass. "And for that, there's no do-over." Stephen's face crumbled. "Please, Mr. Langston, I've got a family." Marcus held up a hand again, not unkindly but firmly. "Then you should have thought about them before you let my hotel rot under your nose." He turned slightly, picked up a pre-prepared termination letter from the desk, and handed it to Stephen without another word. It was clean, professional, unmistakable. Stephen took it with shaking hands, staring at the bold letters at the top. Termination, effective immediately. And just like that, the last thread holding him here snapped. Probably all three. Stephen stood there, clutching the termination letter like it might catch fire in his hands. His lips moved soundlessly, as if he could argue with the ink already dried on the page. Marcus watched him for a long second. No anger, no gloating, just the cool, dispassionate judgment of a man cleaning house. "Security will escort you out," Marcus said simply. Stephen flinched like he'd been slapped. "Please, Mr. Langston, can we at least do this quietly? I've been here 10 years. Marcus cut him off with a small, almost pitying shake of his head. "You had 10 years to do it right, Stephen. Tonight, you deal with the consequences." Stephen's shoulders sagged. He looked older by the second, like the years he wasted coasting had finally come crashing down all at once. Marcus picked up the desk phone, pressed a single button, and spoke 2 words into the receiver. "Escort him." 30 seconds later, 2 security guards arrived. Big guys, professional but not unkind. They didn't put a hand on Stephen. They didn't need to. One glance from them, and Stephen knew the drill. He tucked the termination letter inside his jacket, straightened his rumpled tie like it mattered, and followed them out of the suite without another word. No goodbye, no second chances. Marcus closed the door behind them and exhaled slowly. Not out of relief, out of necessity, like a man clearing smoke from a room after putting out a fire. He wasn't done. He pulled out his laptop again and spent the next hour combing through every layer of operations of the Langston Grand. He flagged bad actors, identified weak spots, set up audits, authorized bonuses for employees who had been quietly doing the right thing without recognition. Because this wasn't just about punishing the lazy and the cruel. It was about rewarding the ones who still gave a damn. At exactly 3:17 a.m., Marcus sent the final command. Full reorganization order initiated. By morning, corporate would know. By afternoon, changes would already be happening. He closed the laptop, stretched his arms over his head, and allowed himself one small, satisfied smile. Not because he enjoyed firing people, not because he enjoyed watching the guilty squirm, but because this was how you save an empire. Not with words, with action. A soft knock came at the door again. This time, it was a young bellboy who had been watching everything unfold downstairs. His name tag said Miguel. He looked nervous but determined. "Sir," Miguel said, holding out a room service tray with a silver coffee pot and a fresh set of pastries. I just thought you might like something while you're working." Marcus raised an eyebrow, impressed. "Thank you, Miguel," he said, taking the tray. "What's your last name?" "Ortiz, sir." Marcus smiled, genuinely this time. "Good man, Ortiz." Miguel beamed like he'd just been knighted and backed away, leaving Marcus alone with the first real cup of coffee he'd had all night. Sometimes the smallest gestures tell you everything you need to know about a person. And tonight, Marcus had seen all he needed to see. The hotel was broken, but it wasn't beyond saving. Not anymore. By sunrise, the Langston Grand was buzzing like a kicked beehive. Word had spread. Fast. Employees whispered in back hallways. Managers huddled in small, sweaty meetings, trying to figure out what came next. Guests noticed, too, the extra politeness at breakfast, the sudden urgency from the front desk. It was amazing what fear could do to shake a building awake. Marcus wasn't interested in fear. Fear didn't build loyalty. Fear cracked foundations. He wanted something better. At exactly 8 a.m., Marcus walked into the main conference room on the mezzanine level, where the department heads had been summoned by a terse email. Mandatory meeting, attendance required. Stephen Lane's chair sat conspicuously empty. The rest of the team housekeeping managers, food service leads, front desk supervisors sat stiffly around the gleaming mahogany table, murmuring nervously until they saw Marcus step through the door. Silence felt like a hammer. He didn't rush, didn't bark orders. He simply closed the door behind him, set a folder down on the table, and stood at the head of the room. For a long moment, he let the silence build, the tension coil tight. Then he spoke. "My name is Marcus Langston. No fanfare, no apology, and I built this place." A few people shifted uncomfortably. A few dropped their eyes to the table. The smart one straightened up. "I built it for a reason, a vision, a standard." He let his gaze sweep the room. And somewhere along the way, some of you forgot that. No shouting, no anger, just a truth that hit harder than any raised voice. Last night was not an anomaly, Marcus continued, voice steady as stone. It was a symptom, and starting today, we're cutting out the disease. He flipped open the folder. Inside were two lists. One list labeled Retain. The other is labeled Release. Simple. Final. Everyone will be individually evaluated. Some of you will stay. Some of you won't. Decisions have already been made for certain roles. He looked up, catching the wide, terrified eyes around the table. This isn't about loyalty. It's about excellence. About honoring the vision this place was built. About making sure no guest ever steps through those doors feeling like they don't matter again. One of the senior managers, a woman with tightly braided hair and a crisp navy suit, lifted her chin and met his gaze without flinching. Marcus made a mental note. Keep her. He closed the folder with a soft thud that sounded louder than any gavel. Anyone who wants to leave voluntarily, Marcus said, can walk out that door right now. No hard feelings. Severance will be generous. No one moved. Good, he said, smiling thinly. Then let's get to work. Because Marcus Langston hadn't come to make friends. He came to rebuild an empire. And the reckoning had just begun. The meeting ended like a hammer dropping. No applause. No polite claps on the back. Just a room full of people suddenly aware that today wasn't going to be business as usual. It was going to be survival. Marcus stepped out into the hallway. The low hum of hotel life filtering back into his senses. Bellboys wheeling carts. Housekeeping staff moving quickly, efficiently, with a new sharpness to their steps. The atmosphere wasn't fearful anymore. It was alert, alive. Miguel, the young bellboy from the night before, stood by the elevator, adjusting the gleaming brass fixtures on a luggage trolley. When he saw Marcus, he straightened up instantly, offering a small, respectful nod. Marcus returned it with a smile, small but genuine. Because the truth was, not everyone had failed. Some had simply never been given the chance to shine. Yet, he took the elevator down to the lobby, stepping out onto marble floors that already felt different under his feet. Not because the stone had changed, because the energy had. Behind the front desk, a new face, an older black woman with steel gray hair pulled into a neat bun, was speaking kindly but firmly to a guest. Professional, warm, the way it should have been from the start. Marcus smiled to himself. He moved through the lobby slowly, deliberately. Guests looked up curious. Staff watched him out of the corners of their eyes. Everyone is wondering what will happen next. At the center of the room, Marcus stopped, turned, faced them all. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "This is the Langston Grand," he said, voice calm, but carrying across the marble like a prayer and a warning at once. "This is my house, and from this moment forward, we honor every guest who walks through those doors. We live up to the name carved into this stone." A few guests clapped, tentative at first, then louder, fuller. Staff joined in, some smiling nervously, some with genuine pride. Marcus nodded once, then headed for the main doors, sunlight spilling in through the tall windows, painting the marble gold. The hotel wasn't perfect yet. There were still audits to run, standards to reinforce, and bad habits to root out. But for the first time in a long time, it felt possible again. Not because of fear, not because of force, but because somewhere between the firing and the reckoning, Marcus Langston had reminded them all of something they'd forgotten. Excellence isn't a slogan. It's a choice, a decision you make day after day, guest after guest, until it becomes who you are. And Marcus? He didn't just choose excellence. He built it, brick by bloody brick. And now, so would they. At the end of the day, respect isn't something you can demand with a nameplate or a title. It's something you build day by day, choice by choice, in the way you treat people when no one's looking. Marcus Langston didn't rebuild the Langston Grand by giving speeches or posting slogans on a wall. He rebuilt it by standing up when it would have been easier to stay silent, by demanding excellence not with anger, but with action. And maybe that's the real lesson here, not just for hotel lobbies, but for all of us. If you value something, protect it. If you believe in something, fight for it. If you see something broken, don't just shake your head and walk away. Fix it. Own it. Build it better than it's ever been before. If stories like this resonate with you, stories about strength, dignity, and the quiet power of doing what's right, make sure you subscribe to Story Precious. We have so much more to share. And trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.